Today we're going to be visiting the city of Dresden, Germany. Dresden has a long history as the capital of Saxony, and after Leipzig, it's the second largest city of the Free State of the Saxony in Germany, situated in the valley on the river Elbe, near the border with the Czech Republic. The city was also known as the Jewel Box because of its Baroque city center. The controversial American and British bombing of Dresden in World War II towards the end of the war killed approximately 25,000 people, many whom were civilians. And here we see its location. And here a depiction in 1719, and here in 1895, Napoleon crossing the Elbe River. And we see the city in the background, just as we'll see here shortly. Here an amazing image during the 1890s. And then we get into the destruction of this amazing city. One of the most amazing cities. And I know I say that a lot, but this is the new most amazing city I've ever seen. And this is only what's left. Truly remarkable. Saxon, Switzerland, a few kilometers outside of Dresden. Now this is remarkable. I mean, this is much more ancient than probably anything we're even going to look at in the city of Dresden. Absolutely amazing to build. I don't know, is this some kind of a aqueduct up in the mountains? Just remarkable. Saxon, Switzerland is a hilly climbing area and national park around the Elbe Valley, southeast of Dresden in Saxony, Germany. Together with the Bohemian Switzerland in the Czech Republic, it forms the Elbe Sandstone Mountains. So how interesting. You know, I've had a theory for some time about the national parks, you know, and creating these national parks where pretty much, areas of control. Yes, we have access under strict regulations. A national park may be a lot more than a national park. You know, they really all seem to have these amazing features, hence, you know, why they designate them as national parks, but there's a lot hidden that we don't see, you know, and could these be remains of ancient civilizations, as we see in Arches National Park here in Utah? Are these arches not natural? You know, are they remains of arches in cities? And when I see something like this, immediately, more has been preserved here. And again, this will require more investigation and perhaps a whole video dedicated on the topic. So why not have a little look? The Bastille is a rock formation towering 194 meters above the Elbe River. The jagged rocks of the Bastille were formed by water erosion over 1 million years ago. Okay, so this tells us there's much more to it, but you know, we have already this story here, as if somebody knows. Bastille has been a tourist attraction for over 200 years. In 1824, here we go, a wooden bridge was constructed to link several rocks for the visitors. The The bridge was replaced in 1851 by the present Bastille Bridge, made from sandstone. The rock formations and vistas have inspired several well-known artists. The spa town of Rathen is the main base for visiting the Bastille. The town can be reached from Dresden by paddle steamer on the river Elbe. Absolutely fascinating. So, what a ridiculous story here that they built. You know, right away when I first saw it, I said, this is, an ancient bridge. This style is just unmistakable. And at first I thought I was looking at some kind of aqueduct, something that we'd see in Rome or even in Mexico. Something amazing. And they want to tell us that in 1824 it was first a wooden bridge, and then 25 years later they just decided to replace it with a sandstone bridge, just to get from one rock to another. And again, in national parks, really the idea is to preserve the national park. They say this has been a visiting area for 200 years. No. This was the remnants, and this is all that's left. The remnants of an older people. And they want to tell us they threw this up just to get from rock to rock, as if that's so important. And in fact, if we look back here, we do see what looks like a carving into the stone. I mean, this stone, if we look at Wise Up channel, this stone appears to have bar work in it, as if these could have been, columns to a grander building, and somehow this was spared. I don't know. But it's really interesting and really beautiful. So, back to our Dresden. The bombing of Dresden was a British-American aerial bombing attack on the city of Dresden. In 4 raids between 13 and the 15th of February of 1945, 722 heavy bombers of the British Royal Air Force and 500 plus of the United States Army Air Forces dropped more than 3,900 tons of high explosive bombs and incendiary devices on the city. The bombing and the resulting firestorm destroyed more than 1,600 acres of the city center. An estimated 22,000 to 25,000 people were killed. Now, there was big debate on whether this bombing was justified, as it happened towards the end of the war, and was in an area that some say could have been a strategic location because there was railway, but again, it was the end of the war, and the city was hit with a disproportionate amount of force, aerial force. And really, when we look at this city, it seems pretty clear that this is the remnants of the ancient people, that this is the remnants of a much older people. When we look at the architecture here, this was an absolutely amazing city, completely built out with the finest architecture one could have in this time period, and I would say even in present day. And look at the quality. And again, look at the trees. This same pattern that we see in all of these burnt out cities and in present times, with these unusual fires that don't burn trees. Look at the trees throughout here. And yet the city is completely charred. This building inside and out, charred. And yet the vegetation in between this courtyard, still preserved. So what was this hit with? And one of my comments in a last video talked about opal, some kind of a opal mineral to bomb this city. And I found that really interesting. But really it looks as if it could have been some kind of microwave technology to me. Especially where we see buildings charred and trees so lush and preserved right next to them. And this is very fishy. Right off the get-go, we recognize that. And immediately following the attack, the Germans came out and said that the death toll was as high as 500,000. And to be quite honest, I mean, when I look at this, it's not unusual for me to think that 500,000 people could have died. You know, looking at the density of this city, the density, I mean, each window, you know, could represent a family of 4 in these apartment-style structures. And what are we seeing here? Just maybe not even a square mile. And this city is much, much larger than this. It is not unrealistic to think that this city, they tell us that there were, I believe, 400,000 people. And so I don't think it's unrealistic that 500,000 people could have been cooked in this city. And when we look at some of these pictures, it seems very possible that 500,000 people could have been incinerated. And they tell us they didn't know what to do with the bodies that remained. And I mean, here's what the bodies that remained look like. And they ended up burning them. There's an account by the author Kurt Vonnegut. In his novel Slaughterhouse-Five, or The Children's Crusade, 1969, he used some elements from his experience as a prisoner of war in Dresden during the bombing. His account relates that over 135,000 people were killed during the fire bombings. Vonnegut recalled the utter destruction and carnage, unfathomable. The Germans put him and other POWs to work gathering bodies for mass burial. But there were too many corpses to bury, so instead the Nazis sent in troops with flamethrowers. All these civilians' remains were burned to ashes. In the special introduction to his 1976 Franklin Library edition of the novel, he wrote, "The Dresden atrocity, tremendously expensive and meticulously planned, was so meaningless, finally, that only one person on the entire planet got any benefit from it, and I am that person." So what can we conclude of all of this? What we do see is both sides losing. You know, there is a complete wipeout in the Holocaust, and then within the same time period there's a complete wipeout of German cities, you know, and in Dresden alone there's the potential for 500,000 people to have been wiped out in one night, and we have photographic evidence of this. And again, I think both sides lose. We the people and the orchestrations behind these events and the reasoning and the stories that lead up to them are often false, as we are finding out. But what we do see is the result, and this seems to me like a clear reset as late as 1945. And the idea that resets are these large events or worldwide events is seeming less so the more we study these histories. These resets seem to be ongoing and selective. They seem to just jump around. And again, if I didn't believe in the sinister nature of a small faction of our race as humans, I would almost say that the randomness may seem electrical in nature, as proponents of the electric universe would state. But again, I think that there is a human or non-human, but a intelligent design to what we're seeing. And right now, we're seeing it in California, and we've seen it in Canada, and in Greece, and in all parts. Recently in South America, and this amazing, amazing piece of footage that came out of South America that actually showed one of these events taking place and what it may look like. And perhaps this was a very small, isolated test, but regardless, we see something that seems unnatural and very selective in its targeting. And again, this technology is clearly pre-5G. And a lot of people want to talk about 5G and its potential dangers, but what we can see is that this exists historically, and we see this in Palmyra, in Syria, and if the structures were as flimsy as our current structures, then we see what we see in California, where entire neighborhoods are reduced to ash, and even less than ash, powder in some cases. But what we see in these photos in Dresden is the remains of glorious structures that were built with longevity in mind and perfection, and even with the amount of force that hit these structures, much does survive. So that's it. Have a blessed day, and please like, comment, and subscribe.